This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
It's time for Ode to a Dead Guy.
Hot Lips Houlihan is no more. Loretta Swit, the well-decorated Emmy Award-winning actress who played the part of Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan on the wildly successful CBS TV sitcom called MASH, has passed away at the age of 87 years old. She won a pair of Emmys, nominated 10 times. Every year the show was on the air except the first, and during the 11-year run of the program, she appeared in 240 of the series' 251 episodes. You might recall, maybe you don't. Feb 28, 1983, the MASH finale attracted a record of nearly 106 million viewers. And as HollywoodReporter.com puts it, a 35-second kiss between Swit and Alan Alda during that episode has been called the most expensive in television history based on its length and the ad revenue per minute. The Houlihan character, the Hot Lips character in the TV show, was allowed to evolve a bit. Maybe one could argue a bit cartoony early, but eventually was allowed, I think, to be drawn out a little bit and made a lot less cartoony and a lot more human. There was an episode in which, she basically expressed her frustration with the other nurses, saying that they never really included her in anything, that there was always this sort of distance between them, and she made the point that, look, I don't like being the one who's got to be the hard ass all the time, but I'm the head nurse. There's certain things I got to do. Very, very memorable episode. There's an episode where she and Alan Alda end up separated from the unit, stuck in some spot, some, remote location, and they end up in I'll just leave it as more than a wild and warm embrace, even though until then, there'd been kind of some agitation throughout the program between the two. Now, the movie, which was outstanding, on which the TV show is based, I believe the Hot Lips character was played by an actress named Sally Kellerman. She was also brilliant in that role. The movie was probably truer to the spirit than the TV show tended to be. I put the TV show in one of those shows that for the first 5 or 6 years was incredibly good. And then I think it kind of softened up a little bit, and it got a little bit campy, and it got a little bit silly. But one of the most successful shows of all time, and she played an extremely key role as a bit of a foil throughout much of it. She had a number of other roles as well, but let's face it, that's what she's largely going to be remembered for. This show, of course, comes well before, I'm assuming, you could have any real memory of it, correct?
Memory of watching, for sure. It was always, though, one of the early rerun shows that was always on, and certainly you understood the significance by people that were just older than me that talked about it a lot. Even being out in California and trying to find Mash Mountain. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where the helicopters were flying in and everything. That was a big deal, too. I remember one of my cousins one time when we were out there. So, yeah, did not watch a ton of it. Obviously, a lot of stars were on that show, people that went on to do other stuff, including Alan Alda. But, yeah, it was not... did not know that she had passed away.
You know, one of the subplots of the story was her affair with the quote-unquote lipless wonder, Major Frank Burns, played by Larry Linville. She eventually cuts that off to marry a soldier she allegedly could be proud of, Lieutenant Colonel Donald Penobscot, not making up that name. And then there was that season 5 episode called The Nurses. She recalled it this way. Speaking of her character, she was the head nurse and her ambition was to be the best damn nurse in Korea, and I tried to help her achieve that. But in The Nurses, Houlihan's conflicted relationship with authority comes into focus when in a memorable monologue, she confronts her subordinates for not including her. That woman was so lonely, and she was trying to do such a good job, and nobody appreciated her, Swit recalled in an oral history that marked the show's 35th anniversary. Gene Reynolds, the show's executive producer, called me the next morning after shooting it and said they'd watched the dailies and my scene was last. When the lights went up, everyone was sniffling, she said. He asked the projectionist to run the scene again. The lights go out and they watched it again. The lights go up and everybody's still crying. He says to everyone, "Is that the best thing you ever saw?" It was a really good moment from a show that, as I said, was pretty much, for many of us at that time, required viewing, even if, you know, it, like a lot of shows, had a hard time, I think, holding on to its bite as it got a little bit. You know, one of the changes, as I recall it, was that they went from on location to sort of like backlot studio stuff eventually, because that's more convenient. But I thought the show lost a little bit there. I would, if you like the TV show at all or heard about it, I would heartily recommend the motion picture. Elliot Gould and Donald Sutherland are brilliant in the movie, and you can't go wrong either way. But the movie sometimes gets forgotten, and of course, the movie is what set up the TV show somewhere down the road. I tried to find a local angle on her and this story. I couldn't find one. I don't think there is one in this case. Maybe there is that I just don't know. You know, there's usually one.
Yep.
I'm 29 years old. I watch MASH on MeTV every single week right after work, and I love it. God bless you, 29-year-old. That's good to branch out a little bit and find things. Robert Duvall played Frank Burns. That was in the movie. That is correct. That was an incredible cast. And somebody's even quoting from the Nurses episode. Did you ever once offer me a lousy cup of coffee? A lot of emotion in that.
Yeah.
A lot of emotion. But an extremely well done work. And like I said, you know, we talk all the time about do people, actors and actresses who have such massive roles that are identified to that degree with one character, even though they've played other parts, does it bug them? And obviously I can't speak for them, but there's always a part of me that says, man, if you can have one role that good, that iconic, who the hell cares? Because when people, at least when they look back, they're not going to go, well, what else did you do? Oh, one very versatile. I mean, who gives a bleep? You rise to that level in that kind of ensemble TV show, I say just love the hell out of that and revel in and have pride in what you did, which I'm sure she did, because that was weekly TV immortality back in the day. And I mentioned the number, you know. We talked about this the other day. What gets $100 million today? Does the Super Bowl even get $100 million today?
It does, but that's about it.
Right?
Presidential debates don't even really get there.
No, that's true. So, sad news, but a very good run. And I don't think there's any information. I think it's being described as she died of natural causes. Nothing in particular that she apparently was dealing with as well. If you have remembrances, hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line, 64687. Bill from Rochester sad hearing the news about the passing of Loretta Swit. I'm 62, and I love MASH. Loretta Swit can be found being interviewed on podcasts MASH Matters and MASHcast. She was a lovely human being. That is Bill out of Rochester, Minnesota. One other one I wanted to try to get to. Watch the original often and in syndication hundreds of times. I always thought the first 3 years with Frank and Colonel Blake, played by McLean Stevenson, and Trapper were legendary, just well written with an edge like so many shows in the early 70s. He's right. That's the heart of it. That's when it was at its best, I think, even though there were a couple of, legitimate character changes, but that was at its very best. The episode in which Radar has to come into an operating room with the news that Colonel Blake, played by McLean Stevenson, who was being transferred out. A key to the show early, key to that whole MASH unit, that on his way out, his helicopter had been shot down. The way Radar delivers that news, and then the reaction, makes me messed up just thinking about it, and it's just a damn TV show, but it's an example of how good it can be.
This is the end, my only friend, the end.
Garzi Maha might be in the meat grinder.
Does that make America healthy again?
That's which in theory...
Good call.
Hard to argue with making America healthy again. Who could possibly be against Maha? But Maha is in the meat grinder right now in a couple of significant ways. And it starts with reporting yesterday that, unfortunately, there were 7 studies cited in a Maha report that was just released within the last couple days that, according to several media outlets, did not exist. The studies themselves were literally made up out of thin air. No one could actually find said studies that are cited to make whatever point the Maha officials were attempting to make.
Was one of those the top 10 hockey cities in the U.S.?
Well, perhaps it could have been. But the kicker is that there are now, with adjustments that the Maha folks made, and they had some sort of cockamamie reason for why things were off a little bit. There was a term for it. I'll find it later. Apparently, the effort to make good, the cleanup in the on aisle 4, is opening new questions about how the report's authors drew some of its sweeping conclusions about the state of American health. At least 18 of the original report citations have been edited or completely swapped out for new references that, since this publication, notus.org, first revealed the errors Thursday morning, while some of the original report's inconsistencies have been changed, a few of the updated citations continue to misinterpret scientific studies. One study apparently identified as misinterpreted in the original report is intended to support the claim that psychotherapy is more effective for children than medication for treating mental health concerns. Study was swapped out with a new systematic overview authored by a psychologist named Pim. Boy, I don't know if I'm going to mispronounce this last name. Queechpers? Who apparently told notus.org that Maha's new citation is also wrong, saying that his referenced study doesn't cover psychiatric medications in children at all. Some sources that Notus didn't flag as non-existent or otherwise problematic in its initial review were swapped out, including a citation on a line about screen use disrupting melatonin production in children as well. Originally, what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said was these were merely, quote-unquote, formatting issues. That was the term used, formatting issues. So Maha apparently has some explaining to do, is probably the best way to put it.
That reminds me, we've talked a lot about my academic career today, not knowing that there was a library that I could go study at until my last 2 weeks.
Very true.
Those citations remind me of some of the ones I came up with in some of my papers.
Did you occasionally create them? Like, did you occasionally,
It's
draw
been
them
so
out
long,
of thin
I honestly
air?
don't remember. And if you don't actually do the work, can you say that you ever made anything out of thin air? I did always think that did always annoy me, though, at the end of a paper. It was always you got the citations, and I get why they're important and you need them, but the bibliography, it was always like the extra kick, right? Like, this is going to take 20 minutes.
Oh,
what really annoys you is
burdensome.
And then depending on your teacher, if you screwed up like a semicolon in the bibliography, then it's like 10 points off. It's like, but that's meaningless. Like, that's just flexing for the details.
No, because they want to be sure you're not inventing it out of thin air. That's the thing. That's the hard. I hated that too. I hated that process. Little footnote, put number 2.
Yeah,
and then
I
put
get
number
it. Here's
3
where I
or
got
the
the
typewriter.
information. I understand all that. But
Yeah.
what bothered me is why did they have to make that part so complicated? We already did the 12-page paper, single-spaced. Like,
Yes.
that was the work. Why are we tacking this on?
But is it fair to say that Maha might need to come up with some real citations?
They might, yes, they need the real studies.
Maha might need the real, because this is important stuff here.
It's supposed to be.
Potentially,
Yes,
is it not?
It's supposed to be.
It should matter.
Did I see Musk is already gone too? Did we know he was going to be?
Musk is gone.
Such
We're
a
gonna
comment?
we should have gotten to that with Kessler Wednesday. But he's basically said I'm done. I've had enough. It was fun while it lasted.
Okay.
The Doge numbers have come down considerably from what he claimed they were going to be at the start. But it sounds like he and Trump kind of were there were some disagreements that were rearing their heads, and he has said, I think he's literally left, hasn't he? He's done. He's got nothing to do with this anymore, with the administration.
President Trump said today in a press conference, they did kind of a mutual press conference today in the Oval Office where they've spent a lot of time together, right?
That's
There's a lot of
true.
times where Trump's just there and Musk is just standing there too with his hat.
And he's the one guy who doesn't have to wear a coat and a suit and a coat and not get ripped for it like the president of Ukraine did.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, you're right. He is wearing a coat at this press conference and his hat.
Oh.
But did say, Trump said he's going to be back and forth. I have a feeling it's his baby. He said Elon is not really leaving, but he's leaving.
I was talking about trying to find a local angle on the Loretta Swit story.
Yes.
There's not that, but there is related to MASH. We're reminded by a listener. This is 651 guy. In the nurse's episode that we were quoting from, the prominent subordinate nurse was played by Minneapolis's own Linda Kelsey. Mike Farrell, B.J. Honeycutt, was from St. Paul, which I did not remember. Is that true?
I have no idea. I'll take their word for it.
Linda Kelsey, I want to say, played, if it's the same person I'm thinking of, she played in the Lou Grant TV show. It was the original Lou Grant. It was the one that came after, the Mary Tyler Moore Lou Grant, where it was a more serious role, where he's the head of he's a crusty, curmudgeonly editor of a Los Angeles daily. And there are reporters going out covering legitimate stories, and it's about some of the conflict that can be involved in that and some of the controversy. I think Linda Kelsey was one of the hard-bitten, tough reporters who was trying to follow the story, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that looks accurate. University of Minnesota graduate.
There you go.
Linda Kelsey. Not Travis's
So we are connected.
and Jason's mom, right? Different spelling of Kelsey.
Different spelling.
Not
yeah,
related to them?
this is Kelsey, as I recall. Yeah, I remember that. That's an underrated show. If you want to go way back in the archives, because I don't think it did fine. I don't think it did great, but it was an attempt to actually present, with semi-accuracy at least. You got to remember it's show business, it's TV, but a newsroom, a major metropolitan daily newspaper newsroom, and some of the challenges that might come up following those stories. I don't even know how many people know, that newspapers still exist.
You can get them at libraries, which we've talked about.
You can
today.
get them at libraries, but now basically it's for most people it's online
Digital.
and nothing at all. And there's still a lot of people who text me every week and say, I'm not going to pay for a newspaper. They make me, there's a paywall. And I'm going, none of us want to pay for anything. I agree with that, but I don't think you can get mad at a newspaper saying, well, we got to we got to make you pay something here because we have
to pay people.
We got to pay people, and that's how we offer this stuff up, and we got a product, right? And then you have to decide. It's either worth it or not to you, right? That's the challenge for newspapers.
And some online publications. Like, I think one subscription to The Athletic is enough, but for some reason, you and I both have two.
Have two, yeah.
It's difficult.
Right, that is difficult. All right, don't forget Lavelle in about an hour, and Ben Goessling when we come back, and we will have some breaking KOC news to discuss with Mr. Goessling. All of that is next. You and Ben Goessling, our next guest, brought to you by our good friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning, are probably both not ideal for me to ask this question to, but I'm going to try nevertheless because I was not familiar with this. Greg from Apple Valley claims that in the Mary Tyler Moore Show, they aired an episode the night before the actual Super Bowl between the Steelers and Vikings, and in that episode, they had the Vikings win the World Series. The hook of the show was that Lou Grant bet on the Steelers. So in the fictional world of the Mary Tyler Moore Show, the Vikings actually have a Super Bowl ring. Had either of you ever heard that story before? Because I had not.
I hadn't, but hang the banner. We'll take it.
How about you, Ben? Have you ever heard that? I know it's before your time, but...
I have not heard that story, no. I mean, I'm familiar with the show, obviously, and the statue and all of that, but no, I have not seen that specific episode.
That's interesting. Well, we'll get hopefully some confirmation.
I'll look it up while you guys are talking and see if I can find something.
That's kind of fun. We do have some breaking news involving KOC. We'll certainly get to the breaking news on Kwesi's contract extension with Mr. Goessling, but I see this headline. Kevin O'Connell wins the PFWA's Horrigan Award for his professionalism with the media. This is the Pro Football Writers of America making this announcement, I believe, today, and the award is given to the league or club official for his or her qualities and professional style in helping the pro football writers do their job. O'Connell was recognized for his openness and helpfulness with reporters. He routinely gives one-on-one interviews, meets regularly with beat writers for off-the-record discussions, provides thoughtful explanations for his decisions after games, and he creates an environment where both players and assistant coaches also feel free to tell their stories. Ben Goessling, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of that is true. I mean, you know, not every day is going to be something where he's going to sit down and open up on everything, and he's got a lot going on. He can't, and sometimes our interests are going to be different than his. But in general, the level of thoughtfulness, the level of respect for the fact that we do have a job to do, even if he doesn't like it all of the time.
Sure.
And just the understanding of if we can kind of understand where everybody's coming from, it's going to be beneficial for us and probably beneficial for him to have a productive relationship with us. So yeah, I would say all of that is correct. And we've seen it, I think, in the locker room too. Players feel a little more okay sharing parts of themselves and sharing parts of their stories with the public, knowing that it's not going to be somebody saying, hey, why'd you say that? I mean, I do think that has an effect on a locker room and has an effect on players in terms of how willing they are to kind of let people know them on a little more of a personal level. So I do think that stuff, in my experience, flows from the head coach. He sets a lot of the tone for that. And I think Kevin O'Connell winning this award in a recognition of that is very well deserved.
Kevin O'Connell is the 53rd Horrigan Award winner. He is the first member of the Vikings franchise to receive said honor. We should mention that Horrigan was a sports writer for UPI and the Buffalo Evening News, public relations director for the AFL for a while in the mid-'60s, VP of public relations for the Bills. After that, from 66 to 1973. So you're telling me is it at all possible that the previous Vikings head coach was ever a finalist for this award? Was Mr. Zimmer ever in even an honorable mention discussion?
I do not believe he was. No, I don't think that was something that The funny thing with Zim is early on, he actually was a lot of fun to cover.
Yeah,
I mean, he enjoyed the back and forth, and when he would say things, he was pretty candid about it, probably sometimes a little more candid than people would have wanted him to be.
Excuse me?
It was the back and forth, the banter, the repartee, if you will, was a lot of fun with him early on, and we'll see if any of this changes as you get. I mean, when you get to do this job for 7 or 8 years, I think a lot of times it does become,
no question.
It feels like the walls are closing in a little bit. I'm sure that's part of what it was there. But no, I in my recollection, he was not ever a finalist for this particular award.
What's interesting about the whole process as it relates to the relationship that evolves between media members and a coach or a general manager is that it is more telling the longer they're there, because early, I think it's relatively easy, right? Because you're the new kid in town, you're the new sheriff in town, you get the honeymoon period. It's not really your baby. You're inheriting somebody else's team, so you got more time, right? At least at the start. But then the longer you're there, the more it's your baby, and I think the easier it becomes to be a little more defensive about whatever is taking place, because you suddenly realize, well, that isn't Zimmer's team anymore. This is really our team now. And so whatever's going on, we're going to either be credited for the good things or blamed for the bad things that take place. And that's the true test about whether you're able to stay quite as even-handed as you can, as some people are able to be at the start.
Yeah, I think that's right. And for him, obviously, he comes in the first year, they win 13 games, and it's all of the one-score wins, it's the last-second comebacks, it's the Buffalo game, it's the Colts game. A lot of questions where it's, hey, this was a dramatic triumph for you. Why don't you talk about that? I mean, that's a little easier to do than, a year where things fall apart. But I will say that second season where they had, I think, 4 different starting quarterbacks and a lot of things just go wrong injury-wise, a lot of games where they could have won and then they end up getting bounced from the playoffs because they blew a lot of those games late in the year. We did not see him, shrink away from that. I think he was honest with us. I think he was willing to work with us and willing to, kind of go through the process in a way that not everybody would do. I mean, it's different when it's a 13-win team or it's 14 wins and Sam Darnold is the darling of the locker room and you're watching him get doused in water bottle showers and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, that's relatively easy to do, but I think the parts where it is a little tougher and there's a little more tension in the building as a whole, not even just when reporters are there, there's just a level of tension about, hey, this is not working at the moment. I think that is a little more of a test, and it's one that I think he's still handled with a lot of respect, and it'll be interesting to see going forward here, because now it very much is their set of work to either accept credit or blame for. I mean, this roster has turned over. The quarterback is theirs. It's the one they picked. It's the one they've chosen to develop. It's the one they've chosen to be the starter this year. All of those things are going to fall very much in their ledger. So it is a little more telling to how this goes going forward in these next few years. But I think a lot of it, the way he has gone about it, I think there's a level of understanding that just representing the organization to the fan base ultimately, because the people that consume these things, the end users, if you will, of stories or radio shows or podcasts or TV shows or whatever, are the fans that follow the team. I think his general understanding of this is helpful for me to have a productive relationship with reporters. I don't see that changing a lot, and I think you probably see that continue to go forward.
Well, to your point about how, though, the longer you're there, the more it's your baby, and maybe even then the questions are going to get a little bit tougher if things don't go well. Yeah. This text, I think sums it up nicely. It's great, this new award, all these feel-good awards and accolades for the Vikes organization, stadium and coaches, etc. In 2 to 3 years, none of this matters unless we start having deep playoff runs or perish the thought an actual Super Bowl win. I can't disagree with that, because at some point that is what it's going to start coming down to.
No, I can't disagree with it either, and I don't think Kevin O'Connell would disagree with it. I've had conversations with him to that effect where he's basically said, like, hey, it's great to be atop the NFLPA rankings. It's great to win this or that thing for culture or, individual awards or comeback player, coach of the year, all those kinds of things. But he knows that the thing, and I've had this conversation with him. We'll be in the grocery store, and people will say, "Hey, just one before I die." I mean, he understands that the fan base wants a championship. They want playoff success. Every team wants this, but this one in particular has lived without it for a very, very, very long time. And I think he would be the first to admit that is ultimately what will tell the story of Kevin O'Connell's regime, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's regime in Minnesota. It's not how nice were you to people, how professional were you. All of those things are good. I mean, that's a good thing. I think that's a commendable way to do your job, but I think he's the first one to say it's got to result in playoff success. It's got to result in a Lombardi trophy, or it's ultimately not what it was hoped to be in the beginning.
The Kwesi announcement, of course, the biggest story of the day, that his contract extension is now official to go along with KOC's that was signed quite some time ago. So, instead of asking sort of general reaction, let me ask you something a little bit more precise. Over the time that these two have worked together, do you get any kind of indication of how their working relationship has changed, if at all?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind there is Kevin O'Connell is probably more involved in a lot of things in the front office and a lot of the things beyond the football field than he was in the beginning. And that's not making the final decision on it, but I think he has realized I need to understand how the cap works. I need to understand what players want in contract negotiations as they stack up to the rest of the market. I have to understand, how the comp pick philosophy works, because it's this idea of why are we doing this or why are we not doing this in the off season, and being more involved where he can speak to those things and say, well, I understand that, but we also need this on our football team. And how do we find a solution that can work for everybody, where we get the quarterback we need to be the backup for J.J. McCarthy, for example, but we don't give up these comp picks that we have coming. I think a lot of those things, he's become more involved in all of those different capacities. And I think some of that has worked because Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, at least as far as I can tell, is somebody that's not saying this has to be my way or the highway. It's not somebody that's like, I have to be the person who had all of the ideas and they need credit for all of the ideas. I think there's a willingness to kind of bring people in and say, hey, Kevin O'Connell, what do you want from the offensive line? I mean, I think a lot of the moves they made this offseason were from Kevin O'Connell saying pretty directly, this has to change and it has to change now. And I think defensively, Brian Flores gets consulted quite a bit. He gets his opportunity to say, this is what I want to go after. This is what I need for this group to succeed. And I think a lot of that relationship has evolved because there has been kind of space for it to do that. There's been space for it to breathe and grow in that sense. And I don't think they see eye to eye on everything, certainly. I mean, I think there are probably things where Kevin O'Connell's background and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's background from analytics, and O'Connell, I think, believes in analytics to a point, and then he's also like, yeah, it's not perfect to do all of this on a spreadsheet. There are decisions you have to make with your gut and your intuition on a football field. So I think there's some back and forth there, and it's just they come from different worlds. But I think they've developed at least an understanding of what the other one brings to the table, and I think the relationship has kind of evolved along those lines over the last few years.
Do we know, or can we assume that this extension lines up with the KOC extension in terms of years?
I would assume, I think that's probably a good bet. I don't know that with enough certainty to say that for sure. My understanding on O'Connell's is that it goes through 2029. So he was signed through 25.
Okay.
They added 4 years to the deal. If I don't have enough reporting. I have not been able to get enough specifics on this yet to know if Kwesi's is exactly the same thing. I mean, historically, the Wilfs have tried to keep those two, the coach and the GM, on a parallel track. And that was very much what they were doing with Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman towards the last stages of their contracts, especially once they've been through a couple of them and the Wilfs had an opportunity to get contracts done, and when it's been both of them and it's not one that's hanging over from a previous regime or something like that. So I think it makes sense for that to happen. I don't know for sure that is the case, because the reality with Kevin O'Connell, and Mark Wilf alluded to this at the owners' meetings, is he talked about, market dynamics, I think is the phrase he used. And what that means is that there would have been a lot of interest in Kevin O'Connell if he had said, you know what, I'm going to coach this out. I'm going to let myself get to the market. We'll see what happens in a year. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, I think, you win as many games as you have, there would have been some of that interest. But the reality is just Kevin O'Connell's network from having worked in football as long as he has probably looks a little bit different than Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's as a relative newcomer, still a relative newcomer to the football world, which is not very quick to change. So did that contract for O'Connell get nudged into a different kind of echelon because of that? I think that's certainly possible, and I think Mark Wilf kind of alluded to some of that. And whether that happened with Kwesi or not, that's one of the things I'm trying to get nailed down here. But I think it's an interesting question, and hopefully have a better specific answer to that soon. It's just I know what they've done in the past, but I also know kind of where some of these contracts might have been a little bit different based on some of the potential competition they might have had for these guys.
Ben Goessling covers the Vikings for the Star Tribune, joins us weekly, brought to you by Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. What do we get out of that's legitimate to talk about the latest workouts, off-season workouts?
Well, I mean, we saw a fair amount of it. We were in practice on Wednesday, and a lot of it, it's still mostly, there's some full team stuff, but it's a lot of 7-on-7, and it's obviously nobody's in pads yet. Nobody's able to put contact on receivers, so you're not getting anything press coverage-wise to see how these receivers are reacting and the quarterback's reacting. But I think J.J. McCarthy, there was a lot of things to like about it. And there were some things that he looked like a quarterback that was still kind of getting his feet underneath him. I mean, there were a couple of interceptions, and I think he talked afterwards about you're trying some different things. You're maybe trying to make some throws you wouldn't make in a game. And it's a little bit like a spring training pitcher where it's, hey, this is the time to work on throwing a changeup in this count that I wouldn't normally do. And I think there's a little bit of that goes into it. So there were a couple of throws that you thought, okay, the defense has got him here a little bit, and Brian Flores was throwing a number of different looks at McCarthy. So that adds another layer of complexity to it that, a lot of defenses may not throw at you in May, but certainly we saw a lot of the arm talent, a lot of the zip on the ball that we saw in training camp last year. He had a number of throws, darts over the middle that were impressive to see the timing and just kind of him able to hit guys in stride and kind of throw it on the line. So there was a lot of that there, and I think there's just going to be a lot of work done with him. I mean, the question is still, I think, is he able to make those touch throws where there's a linebacker dropping in the zone, you got to fit it over a guy and hit some receiver on a crosser in the second window. I think a lot of those types of throws, we saw progress there in training camp, and I'm curious to see once we get into something that resembles a little more of a 11-on-11, a little more of a concrete defensive shell, how he makes some of those throws. I think that'll be something to watch as we get into training camp especially. But the early signs of it, I think he looked healthy. He looked like he's able to move around. I think all of those things looked where you'd expect them to be. It's just you kind of have to take it for what it is, given the fact that it's an OTA in May.
If we are, kind of going back into Vikings all-time history at the quarterback position, can you make the argument that whether it's fair or not, given the circumstances, given what's been put around him, given where he was drafted, given the buildup, that no kid quarterback in the history of this team faces the burden of expectations that, again, whether it's fair or not to him, that he's going to be dealing with, that J.J. McCarthy is going to be dealing with from game number 1 this season?
I think the only one that I would maybe put in that conversation, and I have to think back on this a little bit. We were all around, we were all paying attention. Would be Dante Culpepper, in the sense that he was a 11th overall pick, inherited a team that had been in the NFC title game, obviously in '98, had been in the division playoffs the year before, and walked into a team with a lot of talent, walked into a receiver room with a lot of people that wanted to get the ball quite a bit. And I think there's a lot of those things where you have to come in and navigate a lot of those things as he had to do his first year in 2000. So that would probably be the one that comes to mind as I kind of do the mental index of Vikings history. But yeah, I think it's different now. I mean, there's just a lot more attention on things. There's a lot more intensity in how quickly people form opinions. And the reality too is, like, the quarterback contracts are so much shorter in this new world where you're on a 4 or 5 year deal the questions about, is this guy the guy, I think just naturally start a little bit sooner, because you do have to make that decision on the second contract quicker than you would have had to do back in the Culpepper era, where you could sign guys to longer deals, especially if they're first-round picks. So that's the one that comes to mind to me. But, yeah, I think it's certainly fair to say he's quite a ways up there in terms of quarterbacks in the history of this team that come into that job with a lot of expectations, a lot of pressure, or high standards expected of you on your shoulders.
Well, people are texting. An athletic fat guy reminds us of what about Christian Ponder? And it sounds silly now because of the degree to which he busted, but given the time, there was a decent expectation. For me, the difference is, Culpepper came in, I think, as a decent prospect, taken, like you said, 11 first round. But I think in terms of, college career, McCarthy is on another level from both of those guys to a certain extent. Culpepper sat the first year. Now, technically, even if he hadn't been injured, there's a decent chance, based on the way that Darnold played, that McCarthy was not going to play in his first year. But I think in terms of build up, what he's coming off of, accolades established already before he sets foot, I still think it's a different level. And maybe part of it is what you said, too, is that it seems like with each year, each decade that goes by, we're more impatient. And things, there's almost this demand that things come faster and faster, whether it's even fair to the individual player.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it is just, we live in a world where we reach opinions, we reach takes on things pretty quickly. There's instantaneous kind of reactions to a lot of things. And, O'Connell had some fun with that the other day. It's just in terms of an OTA, how much that's going to get dissected and consumed. That just, we live in a different media ecosystem than a lot of the other quarterbacks did. I think Ponder probably had something somewhat similar to that, but not quite to this degree. And, Ponder came into a team that had crashed the year before. They reset the roster.
Right.
I think it was a 3-win team his first year. So it's probably a little bit different. And McCarthy, like you say, was the most high-profile college quarterback of the guys we're talking about. The fact that you win a national title at one of the highest-profile, highest-stakes college teams in the country, when every game is on national TV, you're playing, century-old rivals sometimes for spots in the college football playoff. I mean, all of those things raise his profile probably to a degree that I don't think Dante Culpepper had in college, certainly not one that Christian Ponder had in college. So that does add a component to this, that everybody that follows football probably already knows J.J. McCarthy. A lot of people probably already have an opinion of what J.J. McCarthy does well and what he doesn't do so well. So you come in with a lot more fractious understanding of him, probably just in the sense of people kind of have their minds made up in a lot of ways. And he's going to be able to change a lot of that in the NFL. But because his high school or his college career was on such a high profile, people have seen a lot of him and know the name and have kind of been baking those opinions on him for quite a while.
The other tricky part of this, I think, is the infrastructure around him, right? That even if people say the right things and go, hey, look, we got to be realistic here. You got to give him a minute, regardless of his pedigree. Yeah. It takes time in the National Football League. That's easy to say in May and June and even July, right? But the reality, I think, again, probably unfair to the player. There's going to be quick, instant reaction, and if he bombs the first month, I don't think there's going to be much of a grace period. I just think it's the nature of things, especially because this isn't a team starting over, right? This is a team viewed as they got a lot of interesting pieces. They went out and were as ambitious as they were in free agency, and you already have some good pieces in place offensively. You tried to fix the offensive line on the fly, too, that there is going to be this sort of expectation that, man, this is different now. He's a high pick. There's no reason he can't be good to very good from the start. I really think that's what he's dealing. Now, he's probably smart enough to know it. That's what he's dealing with, but I think that's what he's going to be. I think people are going to be grading on a very high curve, or very tough curve almost from the beginning.
Yeah, no doubt. I think there's a lot of that when it's a 14-win team. I think the other thing that he's going to deal with, and Ponder had it to a degree, Teddy Bridgewater had it to a degree, is this is a fan base that wants so badly to have its guy, its answer to what the Packers have had forever, where it's a quarterback that you can plug in for 15 years and say, we know as long as this guy's under center, we're always going to have a chance. And that does mean that if he plays well, there's going to be this reaction of, we got our guy. And if he's not good early, there's going to be probably some people that say, well, see, here's another one that's going to bust, and it's never going to happen. So there's just a lot of this when you take his profile, the team's recent success, the team's history, and how badly that means people want to have the ultimate payoff. You do walk into a pretty unique powder keg, I think, in a lot of ways of what this job is like. And he's done it well enough and long enough to know that that's part of what comes with the quarterback position in general, just that everything, blame, criticism, praise, adulation gets amplified probably to a degree that it shouldn't. But this particular situation, yes, I do think it's very unique, the spot he's stepping into. He's generally pretty, I think, introspective and has a pretty good idea of how all of these things play together. But yeah, it's a lot to take on, and he's going to be doing all of it, at a point where he's about to become a dad for the first time too. So that adds another layer of complexity to the whole thing. So it's a lot. It's going to be very, very fascinating to cover it and write about it and figure out what this is all going to look like for him as he goes forward, because it's just a very unique spot he's in, no doubt.
Have a terrific weekend. Good talk, and we'll chat next week. Thanks, Ben.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Dan.
Ben Goessling, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com, brought to you by Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. Lavelle is slated for 5:30. We all know how that can go, but we look forward to whatever adventuresome roads that Lavelle might take us down. In the meantime, top 5 will include
Byron Buxton is back, and we love honesty from coaches. Was a hockey coach a little too honest last night?